Hello, everyone. My name is Jordyn Smith, and I'm the voice and the astrologer on this YouTube channel, Nonconformist Conscience. So, today I want to talk about Uranus retrograde and pull up the chart for whenever it stationed retrograde, and then also the chart for whenever it stations direct, because I feel like there's a lot of information that we could consciously utilize and it be beneficial for the next almost 5 months during this retrograde cycle. It also segues into Mars entering the sign of Cancer. That's happening today on the 4th. Um, and I will also pull up that chart to go over a little bit of what this is initiating through this cycle. So, before I dive into that, I just want to remind everyone that I will be doing a lecture over the asteroid Kassandra for the upcoming second annual online evolutionary astrology conference. If you haven't signed up for that or you want to, I will post a link in the description for that. Um, if you want to buy the whole package, you can watch it all live, each class, each lecture throughout the weekend of October 3rd through the 6th. And if you don't want to buy all of the lectures, you can just sign up for mine or one of the other teachers of EA that are going to be there. There's going to be 15 voices, so 15 different lectures. They're 2 hours each. I'm really excited. Like I said, my lecture is going over the asteroid Kassandra, and I feel like it's such an important archetype to look at. I typically, when someone starts talking to me, I can get a feel of whether or not that archetypal dynamic is activated in their own natal chart. And then I usually start to look at that. Sometimes their Kassandra catches my eye beforehand, and there's usually some story behind it. So, what is Kassandra in a chart? Kassandra is often seen in people's charts who have not been heard or listened to or believed for some type of knowledge that they have or some type of truth that they're trying to express. And there's a complex that goes with that on a psychological level. And Kassandra also needs to be looked at not only the actual physical asteroid, but the nodal axis to get more in depth about what Kassandra, the asteroid, is reflecting in someone's natal chart. But then also the need to really look at Venus and Mercury and the planetary nodal axis of each and their rulers to give a complete archetypal dynamic story that may be being triggered in this lifetime for someone dealing with Kassandra. So in that lecture, I'm going to go over all of that. I'm going to use some of my real case examples. And also just as a side note, Kassandra through transit right now is really powerful. Kassandra is at 22 degrees Capricorn. And so there's this resurgence within social structures right now on a collective level of people utilizing their voice to help restructure society by speaking to some type of knowledge or some type of truth. And it's really cool to look at Kassandra through transit because there's this resurgence, especially of women who are wanting to reclaim their voices right now. So I've done videos where I've talked about Kassandra in transit. And I should probably just make one focused on Kassandra at some point in time of a Kassandra transit. I know I did one whenever Kassandra was conjunct Pluto back in Aquarius a couple months ago, and you can find that on this YouTube channel. I'm trying to think if there's something else I want to mention. As always, birthday special for Virgo going on. until the 20th of October. No, September. It's September now, till the 20th of September. So if you're a Virgo and you want that special, go ahead and you have until the 20th to book it with me. You can book it after the 20th, like for a date after the 20th. It just has to be booked by the 20th. And yeah, so let's dive into this Uranus retrograde cycle and also Mars entering the sign of Cancer. So I'm going to share my screen with you all. And let's have a look at this. Uranus is stationing retrograde, or it did, at 27 degrees Taurus, where it is ruled by Venus in Libra, balsamic to the south node. So this gives us quite a bit of clues about what's going on here. So I'm going to stop this share. I'm going to just speak about the archetype of Uranus really quickly, and then we'll jump back into that chart and I will break down what the start of this retrograde cycle is really speaking to on personal levels and more on a collective level. So Uranus is this function of where we individuate on a personal level and on collective levels. So if you've ever experienced the dynamic of starting to observe yourself and look at what you believe, what you value, what you need, the things that you learned, and you start questioning through observing that within you, is this who I feel that I am? Is this what I really think? Is this what I really believe? Is this really what I value? Is this really what I need? And you come to the conclusion that no, it's not. It doesn't align with my own unique individuality. Well, then you're experiencing the Uranian Aquarian 11th house function of throwing off or rebelling that which has become crystallized or conditioned within you, conditioned thinking that's become crystallized, where we might have over-identified with it. On a collective level right now, we can see that Uranus and Taurus retrograde, especially with Pluto now in the sign of Capricorn, is about this need to get to the bottom of how we've structured society through Uranus and Taurus and Saturn and Pisces. Saturn and Pisces, the man-made structures and delusions that are not in alignment with natural law, that which is naturally occurring, or the natural laws of giving, sharing, and inclusion, which is a Libra function. But also with Uranus, it's about objectifying on a collective level the ways in which we value natural resources. That's a Taurus function. The ways in which we have collectively valued something, or our collective beliefs, or the ways that we've collectively bought into man-made structures that are actually creating exclusionary behaviors. And so on a collective level, Uranus and Taurus has been about really liberating from where within social structures and within the collective community, we've over-identified with things that aren't natural, and the need to transform the collective relationship with how we share resources with Earth, the land, how we utilize those, our beliefs, our thoughts around that, our values that might have perpetuated imbalances or created trauma for groups of people. Groups of people is a Uranian function. Trauma is also a Uranian function. So Uranus is very much about throwing off where we've over-identified with things that really aren't in resonance with higher intelligence that's linked to natural law. There's a really cool Jeffrey Wolf Green teaching. I actually dreamed about this last night. I was waking up to like this kind of echolalian experience of a repetitiveness in my head about Uranus. And it was this teaching that Jeffrey Wolf Green has taught about with Uranus. You can look at Uranus, Aquarius in the 11th house as a pie, and that if you change one ingredient in that pie, that it can actually transform the whole thing. And so if you think about it in the form of observing like the ingredients of what makes you up, right? And something isn't feeling unique or individualistic to you. It doesn't feel like it's in alignment with your own individuality. Well, then you want to take that out. You want to liberate from that, and you want to put a new ingredient in that completely transforms the totality of that. So Uranus in your natal chart is going to show you where and what experiences that you will have or that you could have, the bottom line of the things that you're needing to liberate from in order to continue to individuate, meaning to evolve. And this can be done at any level of evolution, even in the consensus stages, if you're someone who knows about EA. People in the consensus stages still individuate because they're wanting to think for themselves. They'll want to observe or objectify. And Uranus can also get us to objectify our own inner dynamics on an emotional level. That way we can see if maybe we've been projecting trauma onto the present moment. And now we're having to deal with these, abrupt endings or, abrupt external events being triggered that are confronting us with this in order to help us objectify it. So in your chart, your Uranus by house and sign is going to show you the areas of your life that you're individuating in. And then it expands out through the aspects that it makes. But through transit on personal levels, wherever it's Uranus is falling in your own natal chart and what it's aspecting is helping this bottom line function of your own natal chart and the Uranian function within your chart. I mean, you'd want to look at where Aquarius lies in your chart and also what is on the 11th house cusp and its ruler and what it's aspecting, because it's going to speak to the totality of this individuation function for you personally. So in a transit, I'm going to talk to you about Uranus and Taurus, but you can apply this to your chart, but you can get a more in-depth understanding of what this is reflecting for you. On a collective level, if we're wanting to, in true Uranian fashion, shed the skins of the past through objectifying dynamics and liberating from them, Uranus and Taurus in your own natal chart is going to reflect this and how you're meant to go about it and what the external and internal triggers that could be catalyst for this individuation that's underway, this transformative process. Transformation is Uranian, Aquarian, 11th house as well. So it's having us look at, on an individual level, what pieces or ingredients of the pie that we're needing to take out in order to transform that within. So Uranus and Taurus has been about this need to objectify and observe our inner relationship to self, Taurus. That means the need to look at, have conditioned things that have been learned, what we've learned throughout our life, through our experiences, through our social structures, through our familial structures, through our religious or cosmological systems, through our culture. How has this affected your own inner relationship to self, your own personal values, your own inner knowledge, what you give meaning to? How has it conditioned your inner needs? Whether or not you're able to be Taurus, naturally expressed, self-sufficient, self-reliant. It's looking at that and the need to throw off what doesn't feel in resonance with your own inner relationship to self. And that means having to do the emotional work of looking at the emotional dynamics dealing with that. So, Uranus also tends to speed up people's evolution when they are consciously working with it and accessing it, meaning that they are learning how to, when something is triggered externally, that triggers something internally, or vice versa. There's an internal trigger that's now affecting the external. There's this need to consciously work with observing and questioning why. Because Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury. So it is where we're needing to take in new information and observe and objectify the old as a way to learn more about oneself, as a way, Uranus and Taurus, as a way to understand what feels of value. How do I observe what it is that I'm needing? How do I figure out how to do that for myself? And it's this transformative process that has the propensity to speed up one's evolution. So, if Uranus is already something that can be a catalyst to accelerated evolutionary growth, retrogrades have a Uranian function to them no matter what planet it is. It is a function of throwing off by repeating, reliving, redoing in order to resolve through observing, through objectifying, through individuating. But Uranus retrograde, it doubles down on this function. And this is a time where we're being asked to ground into ourselves, our relationship to self, Taurus, as a way to observe what it is that we are needing to liberate ourselves from. And this work is never done. That's the thing. We've been, for the past few years with Uranus and Taurus, really working at transforming our inner relationship to self through observing the ways in which we inwardly relate. How do I talk to myself? How do I feel about myself? Do I have healthy self-esteem? Do I have low self-esteem? Why? Where did that come from? Where do I need to take responsibility? How do I do that? Oh, through observing and objectifying it and seeing what I need to release, what isn't intrinsic to my own individuality, stemming from my conditioning. So this is a time period during this retrograde cycle to really take in more information through our higher intelligence, through sitting still, grounding, paying attention to our inner voice, Taurus, looking at our internal relationship to self, and understanding what we need, what we don't need, what we value, what we don't value, what we are giving meaning to, how our beliefs have affected this. The list goes on. So this is a very internalized process over the next 5 months that can really help us to speed up our individuation. So I'm going to pull up this chart on a collective level. Just think about the values and the beliefs and the things that we give meaning to that we're now needing to liberate from and rebel against on a collective level. And, you know, the next 5 months is something that could speed up the collective's evolution, or we could see an increased amount of resistance to that, or a little bit of both. So, this is the Greenwich chart for the collective. So at the time of Uranus stationing retro in the sign of Taurus at 27 degrees in the 5th house. Okay, it's ruled by Venus. That was balsamic to the south node. And Pluto retrograde at 0 degrees, 0 minutes retrograde in the first house. Venus is in the ninth house, I want to add. So, what is just this speaking to? Okay. Well, Pluto in this first house in Aquarius is about, think back to when Pluto first entered Aquarius last year. This is us continuing this journey of this brand new cycle of Pluto in Aquarius, where we are meant to liberate from old structures within society, within social constructs. And how we go about this is through initiating an expansion within. And this is seen with Sag on the first house cusp, so as the ascendant. So Pluto being ruled by Uranus in the fifth house is the need to, if we're trying to continue this brand new cycle of individuation, of throwing off old ways of thinking, believing, structuring, values, needs. Uranus in the fifth house is about how we're meant to utilize this as a form of self-actualization on a soul level, where it's an act of love. But in order to do that, that means that we need to Pluto get to the bottom of where we've over-identified with different forms of values and needs that have been conditioned. And then you pull in Venus in Libra, culminating into the south node. It's about looking at how the extremes have played out with our relationship to self and with relationships with others or other things, work, friends, family, anything on a psychological and emotional level, that how our conditioning could have perpetuated imbalances. This is what I've been talking about for months, okay? But Venus is culminating into that south node as Uranus stationed. Venus has now passed over as of yesterday and entered a new phase with that south node. So everything we've been learning up until this point about our relational needs through Uranus and Taurus individuation and transforming, we're now called to apply this to other areas of our life, where if we've been learning about listening to ourselves, now we can go out in the world and improve upon listening to others, where we can understand more about ourselves through the counterpoint of relationship, right? That way we can compare and contrast. Oh, you're unique in this way, and that's different from how I'm unique. And so it perpetuates the self-actualization of liberating from what no longer feels in resonance, and then also honoring one's own unique individuality. In the highest forms, this is getting others to liberate from old traumas that have impeded upon them spiritualizing or knowing themselves, or through transforming their inner relationship to self. So there's this huge call to objectify everything that's coming up on an internal level, and then also with the external. Through comparing and contrasting, this feels authentic to me, that feels authentic to you, and also, there is unity and diversity. That's the beauty of understanding equality, that I'm no better than or no less than you, and vice versa. So the other dynamic that's really sparking and speaking to this retrograde cycle is that Uranus is in conjunct the ascendant. both at 27 degrees. And the ascendant is ruled by Jupiter in Gemini in that 6th house. This is a gibbous phase in conjunct. So it has a Virgo-like feel, and Jupiter is in the natural Virgo house. So the key to this transformative process is starting this cycle of looking at our beliefs that we have that have been learned, Jupiter and Gemini, and then improving upon what it is that we know is true for each one of us, expanding upon our own inner truths, right? This feels authentic for me. Maybe I bought into a self-fulfilling prophecy. I was told that through someone else's perception of me, they didn't see me clearly, they didn't understand me, and they told me, this is who you are, this is who you should be. And now I've lived a life where I have let that be a self-fulfilling prophecy, and now I am being confronted with how I've abandoned myself. And now I need to figure out, who am I? Or I need to continue to pull back the layers of the onion to get to the core of that. So this is about also starting this cycle of expanding upon one's inner truths as a way to self-improve. Virgo, the 6th house, that gibbous phase in conjunct can denote where we are met with, crisis to force us to get back on track. What do I need to improve? Where has my thinking been limited? Where am I realizing and being confronted with what I thought was the truth actually doesn't resonate with who I am? And then we look at Jupiter's ruler, Mercury in Leo, in the 8th house, square to Uranus. There's this need to act upon getting to the bottom of the ways in which we've learned. This is segueing off of the new moon in Virgo that happened last week, or this week actually. So there's this need to get to the bottom of what it is I'm needing to improve upon on what I've learned, what I think, what I believe, how that's affected my own sense of security, my relationship to self, how I talk to self, how I feel about self. And then Venus is also reflecting, again, this dynamic of the need to self-improve upon our relationships with others. This is seen with Virgo on this 9th house cusp through looking at and objectifying Uranus and Taurus, the values and the beliefs around what relationships should be. And that is really speaking to what our conditioned ideals have been. This is also reiterated with Saturn retrograde in Pisces in the 2nd house. There's a new restructuring within our consciousness that's underway right now through objectifying and self-reflecting on all that's come before and how that has made an impact on not only our relationship to self, but with others. And now there's this need to have a restructuring through first liberating from this content. That way, new information can come in. That way, we can have healing and cultivate new patterns. Okay? Because also Uranus squaring Mercury, Mercury also rules Mars in the 7th house, and Mars is the ruler of this North Node in the 3rd house. So new patterns of thinking are meant to be had through objectifying old ways of thinking, believing the values as a way to improve and to look at diversity, diversifying this within ourselves, not being so stuck in over-identifying with one way of being. And also, it's cultivating new patterns of thinking that are more in alignment with giving, sharing, inclusion. That means looking at oneself as an equal. Are you someone who needs to learn how to do that? And how to have your own voice of authority whether or not you've had your own voice of authority. You know, as I said, Kassandra is at 22 cap. That is, you know, ruled by that Saturn in Pisces in the second. Has not being heard or believed or listened to in your life affected your emotional structures, the structure of your relationship to self? What do you need to do to heal? Oftentimes, there's a dynamic of carrying shame and learned guilt and learned self-judgment through the projections of others to where it silences us. And then it creates depression because we're not expressing ourselves anymore because we've suppressed our inner voice or just our self-expression in general. And this chart reflects the need to look at that and to liberate from it if that is a dynamic that you are experiencing. And then the need to recover one's self-esteem through self-expression to counteract depression through self-reflecting on these emotional dynamics that we might have over-identified with. For a lot of people, they can be confronting trauma that they've experienced in this lifetime. I know I was journaling last night, and I was already thinking about needing to make this video because I didn't touch on it that much last week, and I really wanted to do my due diligence and do it justice. And it was interesting because I was even journaling about the ways in which some of my trauma has impacted me, impacted my choice making, which is a Mars function. Mars being in Gemini at this time with its ruler Mercury square Uranus. There can be this need to have discernment around what choice to make. Is this, if you're observing yourself and self-reflecting when something traumatic is being triggered externally or on an internal level, because Uranus is all of our subconscious memories that can, out of nowhere, a flash of insight, a recalling an instance that something happened. Well, there can be this need to look at, are you handling your choices through discernment or through the filter of the projections of the past and what you experienced that had an effect on your inner relationship to self? This Uranus and Taurus is really reflecting this need through its retrograde cycle to get to the bottom of this. That way, one can feel more whole into themselves, that they're not being directed by the past, right? It also, when we're pulling in Venus and Libra, it helps us to see others more clearly because we're able to hear them, because we've cleared out our own inner dialogue that is saying this, that, or the other. You know, it's about being able to actually hear where another is coming from because we've recovered being able to listen to where we are actually coming from through observing these dynamics within and self-reflecting. So Uranus and Saturn like to be utilized together. This is pretty amazing when we're thinking about Uranus stationed retrograde with Pluto retrograde at the degree before it re-entered Capricorn. It is now back in Capricorn. It we had a new moon in Virgo with Pluto being in Capricorn. So there's this immense amount of self-improvement on individual and collective levels right now. This is like part of the last hoorah of Pluto and Capricorn. This is the final time Pluto is going to be in Capricorn in our lives. It has been there since 2008. Think about how these structures have changed within your life. Think of all of the learning and the wisdom and the self-development that you've been going through that's been about obliterating just these old structures within. You can reflect back, do that Capricorn thing and see. And now we have Uranus and Taurus that's really helping us to jettison a lot of this. That way we can live more wholly right now and fully in our authenticity. There's this need within the collective to really see a lot of the social structures that are based in man-made exclusionary behavior that have perpetuated imbalances and extremes, where we haven't listened to other groups of people or a collective, or we've imposed our values onto them. That can be a Capricorn Libra dynamic of now, where on a collective levels all over the world, there's a need to liberate from these dynamics and then to expand upon actual truths and things that are timeless in nature instead of temporal. And that's part of Saturn and Pisces, is these old structures are wanting to dissolve in order for us to start to recover and grasp more natural, timeless ways of valuing each other, valuing communities of people, being rooted more in giving, sharing, and inclusion, and seeing the beauty in the diversification of people, of cultures, of everything, um, and to really liberate from a lot of the divisiveness that's occurred. And that can only happen by us really starting to rebel against some of these social constructs that have been in place for a very long time. So that is the start of this Uranus retrograde cycle. The other dynamic that I want to speak to, I'm going to share the Uranus stationing direct chart in a minute, but first, because this is right after Uranus station retrograde, this is Mars entering Cancer. This is happening today in just a few hours. And I want to point out that this Mars in Cancer is working in tandem with Uranus retrograde, okay? So this is also important to note. Mars, 0 degrees, 0 minutes Cancer, conjunct its own planetary north node, entering this square to the nodal axis with the resolution, the point of determination as a way to resolve is this north node. We can't really get into this without getting into Pluto retrograde in Cap in the 10th house, in conjunct in a gibbous phase to Mars, and Mars also squaring the moon, which is conjunct the south node, and the moon is ruled by Venus, which is now in a new phase to that south node. So what is this reflecting? Let's break this down. I'll bring this back up in just a second. Mars in Cancer. Mars is like a self-cleansing oven. It is the desires that emanate from our subconscious. Pluto is our soul. It contains our conscious and it contains our subconscious desires, the things in which we need to act on or discern not to act on, in order for our evolutionary growth to continue, meaning exhausting desires until there's just one to go back to that which we come from. That takes a really long time. So Mars in Cancer is really important to understand right now, because in your natal chart, Mars, wherever it's positioned by house and sign, and the aspects it's making are going to speak to the desires that are helping for evolution to proceed. And it speaks to the desires you have for relationships with others, the desires you have for work, career. It's everything cardinal, right? Um, and the insecurity one feels when they're initiating something new on an emotional level. So, Mars in Cancer through transit is speaking to this process of how, on personal levels, depending on where this falls in your own natal chart, there can be desires that can start to come into the consciousness that help for us to get in touch with what is our emotional security rooted in. What are our responses or and reactions to emotional stimulus? What do they mean? Because what it's doing is it's showing us our patterns dealing with our emotional dynamics. Mars in Cancer wants us to get to the bottom of any type of external emotional security source or validation, so one can learn how to do more of the Capricorn Cancer dynamic naturally expressed in a healthy way of being able to be emotionally secure within oneself, being able to be emotionally mature within oneself, meaning that one is needing to be able to reflect on the emotions that come up as a way to gain wisdom about the patterns and the emotional dynamics that continue to play out in our lives. Pluto is in conjunct Mars as it's ingressing into Cancer. It's in this gibbous phase, meaning that we are meant to improve upon our own inner emotional dynamics as a way to be our own authority, as a way to be able to master asking and answering our own questions and having our own personal voice of authority, being our own authority by making correct judgment calls about, oh, I feel like I want to react to this stimuli out here, but really I need to be responsible in my choices that I'm making when things are coming up. So for a lot of people right now, they're going to be confronted with where things aren't quite working on an emotional level, where they're needing to self-improve upon these functions as a way to create new emotional structures within, a new way of inwardly relating to oneself. Uranus and Taurus. Taurus and Cancer naturally sextile each other, and that means that when one is self-sufficient and self-reliant, that means that they are able to emotionally validate themselves and to feel emotionally secure from within, meaning that they don't have to seek it outside of themselves, that they are able to be self-sufficient and doing it for themselves. So you can see now how Uranus retrograde cycle now has Mars entering the sign of Cancer, conjunct its own north node, meaning that that north node and that Mars, I'll pull this up, are ruled by this moon in Libra, which is balsamic to the south node. It's in the sixth house. Virgo is on this cusp, conditioning this, and also it's ruled by Mercury and Leo in the fifth, which is ruled by this sun in Virgo. So it's this repeating signature of self-improvement that's also seen with this in conjunct from Pluto to Mars. So we are initiating Mars, a new cycle of learning about one's own emotional dynamics. That's even seen with Gemini conditioning this Mars, and self-actualizing through improving upon learning, investigating, being curious about what's going inside of us on an emotional level, because it's going to speak to the habituations, sixth house, of the emotional dynamics that perpetuate different types of inner extremes on an emotional level that need to be improved upon, that need to be purged. So, in order to do that, one has to face themselves. One has to be curious about, what do I need to learn about my own inner emotional dynamics? And then, as Mars perfects its square to the north and the south nodes, which will happen on the 15th. I just want to say that what this is speaking to is, from now until the 15th, we're getting a Virgo-like dynamic of practice, of, oh, I'm going out, I am relating or interacting with other people, Libra, and now I'm being confronted through contrast and comparison or external events that evokes an emotional dynamic within myself. And that emotional dynamic is a dynamic that, on a soul level, our soul is wanting us to learn about in order to continue to evolve. So it's looking at the old patterns of how we inwardly relate on an emotional level and how we relate to others. If we're being triggered because of prior life dynamics, or this life's dynamics, and how we need to liberate from them. Because remember, Venus is ruling the moon, the south node, and Uranus retrograde as well. Venus is now in this new phase. So everything that we've been learning since the nodes entered into Libra and Aries, when Pluto at 29 degrees was squaring them, is now being asked to be put into practice as a way to learn more about our own emotional dynamics. And so we're getting this opportunity to practice all of this, what we've already been working on, and now a new layer of evolution is wanting to take place. More depth is wanting to come into our own inner knowing, our own inner learning about our unique natures, about how we identify Cancer, how we identify with ourselves on an emotional level, how we identify with others on an emotional level. And then, whenever Mars perfects in that square on the 15th, the resolution is this north node. So it's going to be about now putting into practice what we've been learning. It's this continuation of taking in information, learning, self-discovering, doing it in a little bit of a different way, objectifying, self-reflecting, putting it into practice, seeing through, initiating types of dynamics with others, the feedback that we receive, even if it's on an internalized level, what we need to improve upon. And then, as a resolution to that north node, when Mars perfects in that square, it's time to put this into place fully as a way to cultivate new emotional patterns. Again, and that gets us to the bottom line of Pluto and Capricorn, as a way to create new structures, as a way to decimate old structures, as a way to not have to be who we once were, how we can now start to live congruently with how we feel, because we've been getting to the bottom of, this is who I am, this is how I operate, this is why, and here's where I want to improve, and I don't really like this, and I understand where this comes from, but now I have to be responsible for my own healing and for my own actions and my own emotional dynamics and how I react and respond to other people and the choices that I make. So this is a momentous time for this. And the other thing that I want to speak to is so Mars enters Leo on November 3rd, but Mars is going to retrograde in the sign of Leo and go back to Cancer on January 8th of 2025. So this is, again, this cardinal energy of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I'm going to do this work. I'm going to put it into practice. I'm going to start to make this a new structure, a new crystallization in my life. And then, oh, wait, there's more work to be done. There's another layer that I need to learn about within myself as a way to perpetuate cultivating new patterns of emotional awareness, of emotional responsibility, of being in integrity. So that's the other thing that I wanted to speak to. And then lastly, Uranus stations direct on January 29th, 2025. Mars is still going to be retrograde. It's going to be conjunct the north nodes of Pluto and Saturn. As Uranus stations direct, it will be at 23 degrees 15 minutes of Taurus in this 11th house, ruled by Venus in Pisces, which is conjunct its ruler Neptune in a balsamic conjunction, and Venus is going to be balsamic to this north node. Okay, this also pulls in Saturn because it's ruled by Neptune, which is conjunct Venus. Pluto in this chart is in Aquarius in the 6th house, ruled by Uranus. Okay, Uranus is stationing direct a couple of hours after the new moon in Aquarius, which is ruled by that Uranus. Powerful. All right. So that new moon in Virgo that we just had, really, I would say the full moon in Capricorn to this new moon is going to be a catalytic time for us. So let's talk a little bit about this chart. We're going to start with Pluto. Pluto in Aquarius, conjunct Mercury, conjunct the sun, conjunct the moon. But Pluto in Aquarius in the 6th house, mind you, the south node is now in Virgo. There is this need to be liberating from dynamics of where we have over-identified with shame or guilt, trauma, the need to individuate from structures within society that have perpetuated this kind of internalized thinking. There needs to be seeing as Mercury is the ruler of that south node and it's conjunct Pluto, both ruled by Uranus, as it stations direct, there's this need to get to the bottom of what we have over-identified with on collective and personal levels. It's segueing off of all of this content. It's now Pluto's in forward motion. It's back in Aquarius. Well, oh, wait a second. Mars is in Cancer. It's ruled by that moon, right? In Aquarius. There's this need, and it's retrograde, and it's conjunct the north nodes of Pluto and Saturn, which are also retrograde in Cancer, ruled by that moon. In Aquarius in the 7th house, there's a need to liberate from the voices, the opinions, the expectations of others, and to self-improve upon where we've over-identified with how we've gained security or value or emotional security with these types of conditioned dynamics and how they perpetuate self-criticalness, not feeling good about oneself, because ultimately we're not being self-sufficient and the soul hates copping out on itself. Someone who has healthy self-esteem, Taurus, is going to be continuously looking inward at themselves as a way to improve without also getting into self-judgment, shame. It's about understanding that one isn't perfect. So a lot of this can be where we're starting to be confronted with where we might have been self-critical and we've over-identified with perfectionism. And there's a need to dissolve these dynamics and understand how they um, came from man-made social structures and getting to the bottom, eighth house, of how this has affected us emotionally and psychologically and our security within that. Mars in Cancer, ruled by this moon that's in a stellium with Pluto, is about liberating from these emotional dynamics that are not in resonance with our soul nature. And again, it's just this continuation of, hey, we have been looking at all of this inwardly throughout the totality of the Uranus retrograde cycle. We've been collecting information about ourselves on a psychological, emotional level that pertains to how we are healthy within ourselves, right? How that plays out with others. Now it's time with Uranus stationing direct to continue the momentum of self improvement through looking at all of this content that we've come to understand during Uranus retrograde cycle, and Uranus being ruled by Venus and Pisces conjunct Neptune and the North Node falling in the ninth house is also about culminating ninth house Sag beliefs about ourselves, about others, about reality in general that has conditioned and impeded us from knowing the actual nature of the truth of how we've structured reality, how the nature of our truth about ourselves. It's pulling in that dynamic of Sag on the first house cusp when Uranus stationed retrogrades, kicking off this cycle. So now it's, hey, we're culminating these dynamics that we've been looking at, objectifying, observing in ourselves as a way to transform. And now we're going to transcend the limitations that we've thought that we've come to know about ourselves on an emotional and psychological level. And then Venus will cross over Neptune and that North Node. And so that is one speaking to faith, hope, healing, but also knowing the nature of truth. That's about natural law. Ninth house, meaning that there's a need to, one, liberate throughout this time of distorted values that are more temporal, stemming from man-made constructs. And as Venus crosses over that North Node, you know, after Uranus stations direct, it's about, yes, culminating these old dynamics, but also culminating old ideals that have been perpetuated from these beliefs that have been man-made. But then on the flip side, it's about the need to surrender to the present moment and to understand what are more natural and timeless values that are more authentic to your nature. And what does that mean? That means that anything that is naturally occurring in you, okay, whether it be your sexuality or the need and want and desire to express yourself and wishing you could talk about how you feel, but maybe you were taught not to do that, to suppress your voice, to suppress your emotions. Anything that is naturally occurring within us is being asked to look at whether or not it's been suppressed, repressed, or we've been in oppressive environments, and how that's affected what we value, what we need, our ability to meet our own need. And this is a transformative 5-month period of time, but it's also about improvement, that the work is not done, that there is a continuation that needs to happen. And it's reflected through all of these charts with all the Virgo dynamic. On a collective level, this is, honestly, I'm going to be frank with you guys. Everything is up to free will and free choice within collective groups. We've seen the extremes play out. And the things that we have resisted dealing with pertaining to how we've structured dynamics within society, within groups of people, all of that. With the nodes switching to Virgo, South Node, North Node, Pisces, and Pluto being in Aquarius, there can be collective crisis that happens at this time to serve the Virgo-like function. And I'm not talking about right now, I'm talking about at the beginning of the year when this happens. To serve the function to get people to start improving upon this, to start liberating from these dynamics of where crisis has been perpetuated at the hands of humans. Okay? So you'll be seeing this happening in different collective groups of people. You're going to be seeing rebellion and this need to counteract the extremes through another extreme. Pluto and Aquarius is where on collective levels, you've got the people who are super progressive and are wanting to revolutionize. And then you've got people who are the social dinosaurs who want to hold on and resist the collective evolutionary individuation process, and they want to go back to the past. And so we'll see this play out. And the reason why I bring this up is, one, I feel like it's really important to speak about. Most of the stuff that we're going to see, yeah, we'll see it within groups of people, but where we're really going to see it, in my opinion, I could be wrong. I'm not all knowing. All I can do is look at the transits and allow my intuition to guide me through me studying the archetypes and then looking at past history and the cycles within astrology. I feel like where we're really going to see things kick off on a crisis level is with our own natural resources, the way we utilize natural resources, the way there has been global warming, the disease that is perpetuated stemming from that. I think on the flip side as well, Pluto in Aquarius is going to get us to revolutionize ways to utilize resources in a more natural way. There's this huge call within each one of these major transits that I see with the collective, and I don't speak about it enough. I've been feeling the calling to start doing collective readings, like readings for collective and not just individual based. But there is this need to return to natural law, return to our higher intelligence that honors what's naturally occurring and the natural laws of giving, sharing, and inclusion by looking at all life forms as sentient and co-equal to the human race, because the human race is a social construct. We are all conscious, but in different structures, whether that be human, plant, mineral, animal. Earth has a consciousness. And we, unfortunately, as humans, like to hold on to our ideals and our beliefs to the detriment and the exclusion of other living things. And we are going to be living in revolutionary times that Pluto and Aquarius, especially with the nodes in Virgo and Pisces, is to get us to improve upon liberating from these old ways of being and surrendering to the truth of what is occurring, and then how we can improve upon being good stewards of the world. So this is your video. I feel like this was so long. But I wanted to cover Uranus retrograde and Mars entering Cancer because this works together. I love astrology and how you can see like how the cycles unfold and how they build and interconnect with each other because it's just reflecting what it is that we're meant to be evolving. And if you want to know more about what this means for your own natal chart, see what it's aspecting. See what house it's falling in. Um, and if you want to do a deep dive, come see me. I love answering questions. I love when someone comes in and has questions about their chart or, what does this mean? Or what is my purpose? What am I here for? I don't just all of it. I love interacting with common humanity and the struggles and the triumphs that we all inevitably have. And I love being able to connect with each one of you. So these are pretty big transits from what I'm seeing. If you want to know um, what this is being a catalyst for within your own natal chart, I would love for you to come see me. So I hope you all enjoyed this, and I will be connecting with you all soon on another video. I hope you all have a beautiful week, and until next time.